Everything they said in that debate, everything the moderators said in that debate was a lie. Every fact check they gave was a lie. And Kamala Harris lies through the entire thing. Let's get started.
Opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's.
The top 5% of taxpayers pay over 50% of the taxes.
Which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month.
So this is the new lie. She's going to call it a tax. It's a tariff. And she's organized. She's gotten organized with Muir, with David Muir and Linsey Davis. They've got it organized. They know what language she's using. She's calling tariffs a tax.
Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
So she's going to say $4,000 per year. One thing I saw looked up said that Moody's and Analytics said we're paying more than $9,000 each year than we were in 2020.
I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century.
So Donald Trump did not leave us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. It did peak during the COVID crisis, but it came down to 6.4%. And Jimmy Carter had a much higher percentage of 7.5% when he left office in 1980. So that's a lie.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy.
Okay, so it wasn't. He didn't leave us the worst unemployment. There's higher ones than that. He did not leave us the worst epidemic, or Donald Trump didn't cause the epidemic. Later on, she mentions Chairman Xi being the one who came out of China, and it wasn't an epidemic; it was a pandemic. She specifically uses the terminology epidemic, even though they loved the term pandemic at the time. And of course, there's been worse attacks on our democracy since the Civil War, like the attack on Pearl Harbor, the internment of, it depends on what you mean, but the internment of Japanese in prison camps during Civil War, during World War II, in internment camps. That was a pretty good attack on democracy. I would say 9/11 would be a pretty big one. January 6th was not an attack on democracy. The only person that died was Ashley Babbitt, and she was on the side of protesters.
Since the Civil War. We're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
Yeah, that's what Joe Biden said. He was going to be the president for all Americans. What he did do was give inflation to all Americans. She says that Donald Trump's going to be talking about his 2025 plan. It's not his plan. She's going to call that later. She's lying. Donald Trump is going to correct her, and she's going to continue to lie. Her desire is to say whatever she has to win this election.
President Trump will give you a minute to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas. I guess some good, some bad. but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax.
So she mentioned this before, but now listen to David Muir because it's almost like they got together ahead of time and wrote and exchanged notes because he describes it much much better. He calls it a national sales tax, and she called it the Trump sales tax.
The proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication.
Gas, food, clothing, medication. This is all well written down. It was only 5 minutes earlier, and he's written a perfect speech so he can well articulate Kamala Harris's arguments for her.
It costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
This is a loaded question. We're going to see more loaded questions. These moderators, the whole point of this whole debate is to gaslight Donald Trump and make him seem unreasonable and crazy. He says he assumes his point. He assumes that the tariffs are going to hurt Americans, and he asks him, "Do you believe that Americans can handle this?" So that Donald Trump cannot answer yes or no, because if he cannot accept the premise, which is false.
Food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
Presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine.
Now watch how she shakes her head. Tim Walz absolutely repealed abortion. Let me pull this up. Here's what he did. This was a born alive clause, and you can see the line. There's some lines through this. So it used to say medical care, a born alive infant as a result of an abortion shall be fully recognized as a human person and accorded immediate protection under the law. All reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to, and this is what got taken out, to preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. And they changed it to just care for the infant who is born alive. In other words, it is now legal in Tim Walz's state to you care for the infant, and if it dies, that's okay. In other words, that's infanticide, but it's totally legal in the 9th month and even after birth to allow the infant to die so long as you care for it. Now, Tim Walz, on purpose, as part of a sweeping abortion law, removed the language that said you have to preserve the life of a baby born alive. And she's shaking her head. She's a liar. She's acting like what Trump is saying is ridiculous when it's absolutely true. The reason she picked Tim Walz was so she could have a strong stance on abortion, because of his ridiculous stance on abortion in his state is that even if a baby's born alive, you have to care for them, but you don't have to preserve their life.
He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born.
Now, Trump is using salty language here, but he's not wrong. He's saying execution. The point is that the laws do not protect the life of the baby if it's born alive now. And the laws do not protect the life of the baby if it's born alive because Tim Walz signed that bill into law.
Vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape,
Let's skip
incest,
this.
and now states are voting on it, and for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice.
So we just saw
If
this.
Donald Trump were to be
We just saw this, and I just pointed this out. It is now legal in Tim Walz's state to kill a baby after it's born. You do not have to preserve its life. All you have to do is give it care. Let me give you an example. Palliative or hospice care is still called care. There is no law that prevents you from doing things which would cause an infant to die in Tim Walz's state. There is no law. That is the definition of legal. It is legal in Minnesota to allow a baby to die and to not prevent its death.
Credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
There is. That is an absolute lie. And these moderators, every time they fact check, they lie.
Madam Vice.
If Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2020...
His Project 2025 plan, it's not his. He already said so. She did not receive the correction. She's not interested in the truth. She's a liar. She's only interested in saying things which will make Trump look bad at this point.
There would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages.
The breaking news is...
This is a CNN report that has the architect from the 2025 program, Project 2025, saying that Trump has had nothing to do with it.
Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025. Sure, a lot of us have worked in the admin and came together, but this started long before he even announced for president.
President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
Remember, she shook her head earlier whenever Donald Trump was talking about 9 months, abortions at 9 months. But now she can't answer this. She's not for any restrictions. She's going to say she's for getting protection, Roe v. Wade protections back.
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade.
She shook her head when Donald Trump was talking about 9 months abortions. Shook her head as if that never happens. You're a crazy old buffoon. And now she won't answer the question.
And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America
She wrongly mentioned that nowhere in America
is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America.
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020.
She did not make it clear. She made it clear that she would ban fracking. Let's watch.
Question, I'm in favor of banning fracking.
Do you still want to ban fracking?
No, and I made that clear on the debate stage in 2020. I will not
Now listen to this. It struck me as very clear what she says here. She's lying. She's carefully calculated this. This is not coming off the top of her head. She's not saying something that's true to her. She's saying something she memorized.
Ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil.
President, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
So it seems like ABC came up with a list of things that Donald Trump might say, and then they created a line. They went and made a way that they could fact check. Now, it's really interesting what he says. Let's listen to what he says.
Did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed.
No credible reports of specific claims of animals being harmed,
or abused by individuals within the immigrant
or abused by individuals in the immigrant community. Now, Trump's claim is actually not that they're immigrants, but that they're migrants. But it doesn't matter. No credible claims. They call one person, and then they feel like they have the moral authority to fact check Donald Trump. They haven't gone there. They haven't interviewed people on the ground. I've seen many interviews. I've seen people at town halls saying that they have seen personally immigrants taking animals and so forth. So again, this is a lie. They specifically came up with the things they thought Donald Trump might say, and then they came up with a lie that they could say that would be somewhat credible. It's absolutely not credible. And as a journalist, you cannot get away with just getting one source that has a bias and claiming that is a truth statement.
On television,
let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking
television
it from the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you.
She was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking.
Now watch her shake her head. This is something that she does a lot. She's very good at showing her emotions to gaslight Donald Trump. Anytime he says something, she acts like he's completely crazy. But the truth is, what he's saying here is true. And so when she's shaking her head and lying and laughing and everything, she's lying. She's a dishonest person.
Now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think.
Look, she lips. That's not true. It's absolutely true.
Of.
Look at here you go. It's still on Twitter. Go look it up. If you're able to chip in now, the MNF Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota.
Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania.
Linsey, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them.
Okay, so he didn't tell them to march to the Capitol. What he did was he mentioned that they would be marching to the Capitol. He didn't directly tell them. Let's look at some of this highlighted stuff. It's up to Congress to confront the egregious assault on our democracy. We are going to walk down to the Capitol and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering on some of them, because we'll never take back our country with weakness. We have to show strength and we have to be strong. We have to come to demand the Congress to do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Now listen, this is the only part that could look like it was direction. Like, this is the only part where he's telling them what to do. And this is what he tells them. He says, I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Peacefully and patriotically.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. Today we will see whether Republicans stand strong for integrity.
Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office.
Now, here's another one. This is another loaded question. He's going to say, sir, are you still a scumbag? Are you ashamed of the fact that you were a scumbag? Or do you regret anything? Do you regret what you did? Now, the only reason why anyone would think he did anything wrong was because of the news media has reported it over and over and again that he incited violence, but he did not. I just showed you. He said peacefully and patriotically. And now he's going to ask him a loaded question. And I know everybody wants to hear people say yes or no whenever they're asked these questions. But these moderators are incredibly biased, and they're gaslighting Trump, and they're making it difficult for him to say anything at all. He has to accept the premise that he has something to be ashamed of. He didn't do anything wrong, and he's not going to take the blame for it.
You did send out tweets.
So Donald Trump set out tweets the day of, and the last one he did from Facebook was at 2:15, I believe, p.m. But he told them several times, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. I mean, asking everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful, no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. And they're mad that he didn't send. It doesn't matter what he did. If he sent a video, it would still not be enough. They wanted it to be riotous. That's the reason why Nancy Pelosi did not take the National Guard that Trump offered. They wanted it to be a riot. They made a story out of nothing.
You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
What did he do? He didn't do anything wrong. And I challenge anybody on the internet, go show me evidence that Donald Trump incited a riot. Go show it to me. And make sure you do it in context of him saying peacefully and patriotically.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
So it's a yes or no question. It's like the question, do you still beat your wife? You can't answer it without taking some sort of blame. So if he says, I don't regret anything, then you're like, oh, well, so you loved your heinous crimes. If he says, I do regret X or Y or Z, now he's taking the blame, even though he didn't do anything wrong. It's not his fault.
Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me.
See, these are all really good points, except for everyone in the room is looking at him like he's insane. Like they've never heard this before, like he's some sort of nutcase, and they're just hoping that the medicine kicks in soon. This is a 3-on-1, and everyone here, except for Trump, is trying to make Trump look like he's a raving lunatic.
It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
He does this a lot. He asks Donald Trump a difficult question, and he keeps badgering him, trying to get the answer. And then when Donald Trump, he can't get a good answer out of Donald Trump, he can't get him to incriminate himself, then he turns to Kamala Harris and says, hey, what do you think about Donald Trump? Is he a dirtbag or not?
On January 6th.
Now, she just said she was at the Capitol on... Let's listen.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th.
She was not at the Capitol, actually. That's a lie. She claims it, and she claimed it before at the impeachment stuff. But Freedom of Information Act got video of her coming out of the Capitol at 11:21 a.m. She was actually at the DNC. She was not in any danger whatsoever. Except for there was a pipe bomb at the DNC that somebody had planted, or supposedly. So again, a lie.
I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital.
The mob was not violent. There were some police officers hurt, I think, with stuff being thrown way later on. Donald Trump did not incite them. There's no evidence of that at all. Even though they had an impeachment and everything else, there's no evidence of it. And I would challenge anyone to show me true evidence that Donald Trump incited them to violence.
To desecrate our nation's capital.
He didn't invite them to desecrate.
On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
There was none that died. There were no officers that died that day. Brian Sicknick died on January 7th, the day after it. But even on the United States Capitol Police website, it's a .gov website, that the press release says that medical examiner finds USCP officer Brian Sicknick dead of natural causes. And they go on to describe how the riots were really bad and stuff like that. But truthfully, it's unavoidable. No police officers die as a result of the riots, and none died on January 6th. It's a lie. Kamala Harris is a liar. She lies to get what she wants. She is an immoral person. She is a truly immoral person, and all Democrats are liars. All Democrats will hide what they believe because deep down they know that it's despicable.
And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
This is a lie from the very beginning. it's absolutely taken out of context. Only a Democrat would lie so badly.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville
Excuse me.
to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't let themselves stand as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group.
Listen, he said you had some very bad people in that group.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue.
So over on the side of the people wanting to preserve the statue, that was the same side that they had the neo-Nazis. Now, he said there was some bad people, but there was also fine people on each side.
And the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
So if you just skip just a little bit.
Excuse me, how about Thomas the statue? Because he was a man. You're changing his and the white nationalist culture.
Okay.
So you know what? It's fine. You're changing
And just a
history,
few
you're
seconds
changing
later, or
culture,
20 seconds
and you
later,
had people, and I'm
now
not talking
he's
about
gonna
the
say-
neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
The
But you had
neo-Nazis and the white nationalists should be condemned totally. I'm not talking about them.
many people in that group other than
What did Kamala Harris say? There were anti-Semitic people with tiki torches. She's talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. And what does he say in this press conference? He said there was fine people on both sides, but then later on he says he's not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists. If you believed that lie before, understand you were a fool. That you were ignorant fool. If you believed her when she said the fine people on both sides, if you believed her when she lied to you, you were an ignorant fool. Please consider not being a fool anymore.
neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by.
Now, what do you believe that means? Because when Donald Trump actually said that, he was not taking ownership of them. He was responding to Chris Wallace and saying he was disavowing them. If you believe her now, if you believe what she was saying, that it means that he's a bad person, that he loves white nationalists or whatever, again, you're an ignorant fool and you need to change. You need to change. You need to turn to my rebuke now. Like, these are all lies. If you believe her, if you right now believe her, you're an ignorant fool, and you need to repent of that. Now, this lie in particular, the refusing to condemn white nationalists, they've been doing this since 2015. I got this from the Daily Wire. It's a montage. It's kind of long, but we got to watch it all.
Just joined. A bigot, a racist, a problem.
Would you repudiate David Duke?
Sure.
David Duke and robocalls are out again, the white supremacist movement supporting you. Do you have any words for that?
Well, I disavow.
David Duke endorsed me? Okay. All right. I disavow. Okay?
When we looked at it and looked at the question, I disavowed David Duke. So I've disavowed David Duke all weekend long on Facebook, on Twitter, and obviously it's never enough.
Trump's refusal to condemn, distance himself from white supremacists.
The Anti-Defamation League is already out there asking the president to clarify why he didn't condemn white supremacists.
So are you prepared right now to make a clear and unequivocal statement renouncing the support of all white supremacists?
Of course I am. Of course I am.
When Chris joined, we had a news conference, and they asked me the exact same question. I said, I disavow. I disavowed then. I disavowed today on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. I disavowed again.
David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years.
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan.
See, this is the Democrat lying plan. It's to gaslight Donald Trump and continually say the same thing. Are you willing today to disavow white supremacists? And then whenever he's not there, they'll say, Donald Trump to this day refuses refuses to condemn white supremacists.
I totally disavow David Duke. Ultimately, he got to the Ku Klux Klan, which obviously I'm going to disavow.
I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan.
David Duke is saying to his supporters and followers, vote for Donald Trump. White supremacists are saying, vote. Do you want those votes?
No, I don't want them, and I don't want him to say it.
And you don't want the supporters?
No, I don't want anything.
What do you think of white supremacists, by the way?
I don't like any group of hate.
David Duke announced his Senate candidacy, claiming your agenda.
Are you ready before you ask the question?
Newt Gingrich said every Republican should repudiate this guy no matter what it takes.
And I do. Rebuked. Is that okay? Rebuked.
Rebuked.
Done.
Just to clear it up,
October 1st, 2020, again, for the bajillionth time, Donald Trump, will you condemn white supremacy?
Can you, naming it, make a declarative statement that you denounce, that the president denounces it?
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists.
Do you want white supremacists to vote for you?
No, I don't at all. Not at all.
His campaign is denouncing a show of support from the KKK's official newspaper, as in the Ku Klux Klan.
In the same New York Times interview, he denounced white supremacists. He denounced the neo-Nazis who support him.
President Donald Trump signed a congressional joint resolution that condemns white supremacy, neo-Nazis, and other hate groups.
When he was asked to condemn white supremacists, he didn't.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
When specifically asked if he would denounce white supremacists, that the president dodged it.
I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence, and strongly condemned the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, and the KKK.
Well, I have to say that it's disappointing that a sitting U.S. president can't outright condemn white supremacy.
In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy.
The President of the United States, in the year of our Lord 2020, refuses to condemn white supremacists.
Any group of hate, I don't like it. Any group of hate, I am, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's any other kind of supremacy, whether it's Antifa, whether it's any group of hate, I am very concerned about it, and I'll do something about it.
He has yet once to condemn white supremacy, the neo-Nazis. He hasn't condemned a darn thing.
So now notice as Chris Wallace is asking him, he asks him to use the word stand down, the phrase stand down, which Trump, I think, tries to use, or he says something very similar to that. Chris Wallace wants him to condemn it and then say stand down. And Donald Trump says stand back and stand by, which is to say stop being part of the violence, the 2020 violence. And so he condemns him and he says stand back and stand by. And they're trying to make it seem like
to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
who would
white
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
So they finally got the clip they wanted. They kept badgering him. And then he said something. He was saying what Chris Wallace wanted. He was saying stand back and stand by. He's saying, because Chris Wallace told him to say stand down, and because he didn't just want him to condemn it, he wanted him to tell him to stand back, right? Well, that's what he told him, stand back and stand by. But then they used that to show that Donald Trump is now the commander of the Proud Boys. They figured out how to get a clip, and now from now on till the end of time, they're going to lie about it and say that Donald Trump's intention was to take ownership of this militia, because the Democrats are liars. They are not interested in the truth. They're interested in saying whatever is necessary to win. It's the immoral party of Satan.
On each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back.
Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide.
Falsely
In
claimed.
the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate,
David Muir states his own opinion that Donald Trump was false when he said that. And it's gaslighting. Everyone has to say everything just right so that Donald Trump looks like the crazy person.
you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know
those-
that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video.
He watched these pieces of video. Some intern over at ABC put together a few little bits of video out of context. And David Muir, on the basis of his moral authority and how he knows deep in his soul that Donald Trump is evil, he can make judgments about whether or not he was sarcastic.
I didn't detect the sarcasm.
So he's going to tell the person who was being sarcastic that he knows better because he didn't detect it when he was watching pieces of video.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm. Lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it.
And as I said, every time the moderators fact check, they're lying. Now we're going to see specifically what he could have known. Now, the fact that he's ignorant does not change the fact that it's a lie.
I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time you
interview myself,
you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that. And
now, so Donald Trump is setting it up. He says he's got millions of votes. He's got way more than what he needed, according to what everyone had said, for him to win.
Lost by a whisker.
He said lost by a whisker.
Now, and then this is 5 minutes later in the conversation, or 11 minutes, I can't remember. This is later on in the same conversation. Lex Friedman is going to try to get him to maybe soften on his position of fraud. Since he said lost by a whisker, he's bringing it back up, giving Trump an opportunity to reach out to the liberals and say, well, maybe I lost a little bit or whatever. But Trump doesn't take the bait. In order for you to know that lost by a whisker was sarcasm, all you would have to do is watch the whole debate, the whole conversation here with Lex Friedman.
I'm an independent. I have a lot of friends who are independent, many of whom like your policies, like the fact that you're a deal maker, like the fact that you can end wars, but they are troubled by what happened in the 2020 election and statements about widespread fraud and this kind of stuff, fake electoral scheme. What can you say to those independent voters to help them decide who to vote for?
I think the fraud was on the other side. I think the election was a fraud. And many people felt it was that, and they wanted answers. And when you can't challenge an election, you have to be able to challenge it. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, not better.
Donald Trump believes the fraud was on the other side. He still believes it's fraud. There's no reason why anyone would think when he said lost by a whisker, it was anything other than sarcasm. They are trying to make Donald Trump, the ABC's biased. They purposefully clipped things out of context in order to make Donald Trump look like as big a liar and flip-flopper as Kamala Harris, which he is not, because he says he has things he believes and he says them. Kamala Harris clearly says whatever she thinks will get her more points.
This business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
So even earlier in the interview, I didn't point it out, but I could have. Linsey Davis specifically called her out for flip-flopping on this. In previous debates, she said she wanted mandatory buybacks. And now she's saying that's absolutely not true, whatever. But she keeps just denying openly that she ever held that position.
Opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said.
All right, so we're back at the beginning. What is this? What do we need to learn from this? If you're a Democrat and you're watching this at all, and you were at all surprised by any of the truth that I've had to reveal to you, all the fact checking I've done, were you aware that some good people on every side was a lie? Were you aware of the stand back and stand by? That was a lie. Were you aware that that Tim Walz made it legal to kill a baby after it was born alive? Tim Walz rolled back the legislation which said that if a baby was born alive, that you're to preserve its life. Took away the language, so now all you have to do is give it care. If you're a Democrat and you're watching this, and I hope you are, and you've learned anything at all, you need to know this is just scratching the surface. The party that you are a fan of is the party of lies, because their father is the devil. That's just how it is. They like to murder babies, which is classic devil stuff. Molech and false gods have been calling for the murder of babies and unborn, well, for infants for a long time. They're the party of transgenderism, which is the destruction of the image of God, which is people with perfectly good bodies destroying them so that they can pretend to be something that God did not make them. They're the party of homosexuality and increasing divorce and things like this. All of these things are destructive to society. They're the party of expansive welfare. And how do they get all these things done? They lie to you. They lie every time. Kamala Harris, almost everything she said, and I can't prove everything because she promises things, and I can't disprove a promise, but almost every fact claim she said was wrong. She even lied about being in the Capitol during January 6th. She lies probably more in this debate than she tells any sort of truths, because she's a Democrat. And if you will look into it, you'll find that they lie a lot. And they lie so that they can do evil things. This debate was a 3-on-1. You had 3 people carefully, calculatedly lying and gaslighting Donald Trump to make him look like he's crazy. And every time he says something that's true, Kamala Harris will shake her head as if it's a lie. And you know, what can I say? Hopefully the American people can see through this garbage. Hopefully the American people can see through this debate, because it was really pathetic, and it was sad to watch. Really, ABC fact checking more than 3 times. Each of the fact checks themselves lies, not just opinions, but lies. Kamala Harris, she says every destructive lie she could think of. That's your party. If you're and then finally I want to just say, if you are a Christian, if you believe you're a Christian, and you're a Democrat, I think you're probably mistaken. Because only an ignorant fool will follow the Democrat Party. And I think that anyone that has truly believed in Jesus Christ will have wisdom in their heart enough to see through all these lies. Now, is Donald Trump a great person? No, he is in his own right a scumbag. He is an entrepreneur, and he is a man who has had multiple marriages and had affairs and things like that. But Kamala Harris is no better on that front. She's known for having made her way in the legal world by dating when she was 30 a 60-year-old man. She's made her way by, and there's many accounts of this, immoral means. She is no better than Donald Trump in regards to their physical and sexual immorality. But I would say that she's clearly a Democrat in how she lies. She's pro-abortion. She is pro giving lots of money away to people to destroy our economy. None of these things are consistent with Christian values. And every Christian ought to vote Republican come November. And if you can't vote for Donald Trump and you're a Christian, I don't think you should vote for anyone because the Democrat Party is the party of murder and transsexuals and homosexuals and expanded divorce and destruction of the family, expansive welfare, all this kind of stuff that the devil is for. The Democrat Party is for. You cannot vote Democrat and consider yourself a Christian. I hope you, if you are watching this, you will seriously consider this. And I'm saying all this stuff with love. I think people who consider themselves to be Christian and also willing to vote Democrat have a lot of thinking to do about the morality involved with that. This is your wake-up call. If you think you're a Christian and you're a serious Democrat, think again, because the morality that comes in Christ, that we can see in the Word of God, it's not working in your heart and mind. Everybody needs to get out and vote. Everyone needs to vote Republican in November. Thank you, and God bless.